Hello and welcome back to Random Vids. Sorry, I took a week off last week. We were just so busy last week doing a bunch of stuff, but I'm back this week and a video that I haven't done yet that just kind of is like, wait, why didn't I do it yet? So a few weeks ago, I made a video on the top 10 SpongeBob episodes that a lot of people really seem to love, or like I find extremely overrated. I just find it like, you know what? It honestly isn't that good. Why do the people like this episode that much, etc., etc. This week, today, I feel like we should kind of do vice versa of that. I feel like we should talk about the 10 SpongeBob episodes that a lot of people don't really enjoy that much, or I just find that or they're like extremely underrated episodes, but I actually find it, actually good episodes that I enjoy, and ones that I can be like, you know what, this is a SpongeBob episode. And I didn't think I'd be finding a lot, but I definitely did find a lot, especially from the mid-seasons, but we'll talk more about that later. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the top 10 SpongeBob episodes that everyone hates that I like. Let's move right on to number 10, which is Naughty Nautical Neighbors. So we are starting the list with a Season 1 episode. And just to let you know, just to let you be prepared, there is not a single Season 2 or 3 episode in here. Season 1 or 2, Season 2 or Season 3 episode in here. Basically all the episodes, most of the episodes that are liked from that season, or most of the ones that are disliked by people, I can agree with. And I mean, let's be real, Season 2 and 3 are so overrated it ain't even funny. Season 1, on the other hand, I do have at least one option for you. Or one episode. And I will admit, I completely forgot about this episode too. It's just such a random episode in Season 1. It's not as well known as something like Pizza Delivery, or even the worst ones like I Was a Teenage Gary. And of course, it's not really hated by anyone. I mean, it's a classic episode, so of course it ain't going to be really hated by anyone. So Naughty Nautical Neighbors, I feel like is a Squidward, SpongeBob, and Patrick episode done right. You see, instead of Squidward being the one who's tortured, now it's no one getting tortured even. It's just a funny, goofy episode. Now you're probably like, okay, what is the episode? Alright, let me tell you. So SpongeBob and Patrick are playing a game where they whisper into a bubble, and then the bubble flies across Squidward's yard to the neighbors. AKA, SpongeBob talks into a bubble and it goes to Patrick, and Patrick does the same. So Squidward creates his own bubble and says a bunch of mean things to SpongeBob and Patrick, which gets them turned against each other. And Squidward ends up choking on a fork. Oh, never mind. We do have Squidward torture in it, but at least it isn't annoying. And Patrick comes and, saves Squidward, which is very strange to see him do that. I'm used to seeing Patrick be like the dumb, annoying one here. If this was in a Season 6 episode, Patrick would be laughing his head off at Squidward. But no, Patrick actually came in, saved Squidward, which is really nice of him. But I mean, this is back when they did Patrick episodes right. Instead of making him act like a big dum-dum, and then trying as hard as they possibly can to make him decent again, which doesn't work. Anywho, so of course SpongeBob gets upset, and we get to see a lot of rinse and repeat of Patrick playing with Squidward, and then SpongeBob playing with Squidward, and it's kind of funny seeing Squidward actually, want to play with them, which is just so nice to see, and it's kind of funny too. Then towards the end, Squidward goes out of his house, and SpongeBob and Patrick magically become friends again over soda. It's so funny. So Squidward goes to buy more, and of course, by the time he's back, guess what's destroyed? No, not his house. You thought I was going to say his house, right? And so the episode kind of ends like nothing ever happened, basically, but it leaves you with just a satisfied original SpongeBob episode. And I'm surprised how much praise these 3 seasons have gotten, that this episode ain't one of them, because looking back on it, it's a good season. And of course, by good season, I meant this is a good episode, especially compared to other stuff like Good Neighbors from Season 4. And now that is the true Squidward torture episodes. This is just, I don't know, it's just funny. Plus, there's a bunch of funny things in this episode, too, like Patrick getting his head hit with his rock, and SpongeBob creating eyes and mouths on his fingers, and he's like, the gang's all here. It's just such a goofy episode, in my opinion, and it's just such an underrated one, too. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I forgot it exists, too, but I mean, when you remember it, it is definitely a good episode. Let's move on now to number 9, which is The Great Patty Caper. Oh boy, I feel like once we got past like season 4, a lot of the episodes and definitely specials just became so just not focused on anymore. No one wanted to see what Mid SpongeBob wanted to offer. And I mean, I will agree, Mid SpongeBob was definitely the weakest part of SpongeBob. But that doesn't mean that you get a few good episodes here and there. In fact, there's a lot of pretty good episodes that aren't talked about enough or like at all. It's just sad to see, because yes, it is you could have a good episode from Season 7, but it's hardly talked about. Like I said, the only overrated mid-season episode is Sandcastles in the Sand. But like, really? That's the overrated episode? What about some of these other ones that are like, never talked about? Like, you know, The Great Patty Caper, for an example? I know, this is ripping out of like, mid-SpongeBob. Yes, ripping out of Season 7 of all things. But you know what? This episode is actually quite good. Now, yes, it's definitely not my favorite from Season 7, but it's a pretty good one, and it's a special, too. So, you know, okay. And there's no Patchy in it either, so good. Anywho, SpongeBob is on a train taking the secret formula to, I guess, out in the middle of nowhere. Of course, he takes Patrick, and Plankton comes along, too. You know, to see where the secret formula gets taken to, of course. And then we get to see a bunch of different cool train scenes, too. And, I don't know, it's kind of interesting seeing what they end up doing with this episode. They finally make it to the middle of nowhere to get to deliver the Krabby Patty formula, and then Plankton is the one who takes the formula to the middle of nowhere, but Mr. Krabs is waiting there all along. And, yeah, that's basically the special. Yeah, it's not a big masterpiece or anything, but it's not all that bad. I find it pretty good, actually. I just like any train episode in general, because they did so much with this episode, and it's fun. It doesn't feel like filler at all, which is strange because it's coming from Season 7. Also the fact that this is a longer episode, too. But nope, not too much filler, at least in this episode. Sure, Patrick ripping off the brake and throttle thing is kind of annoying, but at least that was the only thing I could find, like, annoying about this episode. Sure, they get kicked out of the train, but they end up back on, plus they aren't like... It's not like they mope and like, oh, we're never gonna catch up to the train. No, they actually go and try to catch up to the train. I love the random things where they're like trying to chase Plankton through the train, and when the whole front is just off of the rest of the cars. I don't know what you want to call it. Breaks free from the rest of the cars, I guess. The dining car is kind of cool, and I mean, it's also kind of funny whenever Patrick's trying to stop the train, and he does a bunch of stuff like has free lemonade and stuff. You know what? That was actually kind of funny, coming from, you know, the worst character derailment I've seen in a while. It's nothing too special or anything. It's not going to be the best episode ever, but it's a pretty good one. I could say it's definitely a better episode from Season 7. This is the same season that got garbage, like One Course Meal and Yours, Mine, and Mine. Now you see, those are the true baddies here. The Great Patty Caper is actually, you know, a pretty good Season 7 episode. Now let's move on to Season 8. Or not Season 8, Number 8, which is Swamp Mates. Okay, now here's a question I have for you. Did you think that mid-SpongeBob, Seasons 4 to 8, or even like 4 to 9, are like the worst? Or do you think modern SpongeBob is the worst? You know, Seasons 9 to 12, or even like 13 now. Because a lot of these modern SpongeBob episodes do get a lot of hate too, which is very just... I don't know what the word is, but like, I don't know why. I find a lot of these modern SpongeBob episodes actually, you know, good. They're trying to get back to how they used to be, and in my opinion, they're doing a good job. Heck, I think I'd almost prefer modern SpongeBob over original SpongeBob, and that is saying a lot. Like, the show is really trying, and you can clearly see they are. Just look at Season 10 and compare it to, like, Season 6. There is a big difference. And yes, you still get your duds here and there, but that's how the original era was. You got your duds here and there, and then most of the other episodes were really good. I just find it a criminal that these, modern seasons are so underrated. That's just my opinion, though. I really love the modern SpongeBob era, and they're doing a good job with it. Aside from a few things, I think it's better than the original era, and I know, that's saying a lot. And Swamp Mates just happens to be one of them. It's such a good, season 12 episode. So, Bubble Bass is having a play date with Patrick, of all characters, of course. And they end up going on this adventure through, the woods. I don't even know what that is. A weird place. Oh, swamp. Duh. Because they're trying to rescue Bubble Bass's action figure, because if they don't, then Bubble Bass will be sad and throw a fit. But it's this kind of writing that's just so interesting to watch. And you gotta love how modern SpongeBob has brought Bubble Bass back to not just, a character you see every once in a while, but, almost a recurring character you see, all the time, which is cool to see. Just because Bubble Bass is just such an interesting character that I'm glad we're getting a lot of episodes with him in it. I mean, just look at Season 1 of SpongeBob. We got him in Pickles and then Fun, which are fine episodes, but I mean, I like these ones better where he actually is, the main character. That's also why I like episodes like Moving Bubble Bass, for an example. Anywho, you would expect the modern writers who are really trying to push Patrick back to his funny character to make this episode worse because, Patrick is in it. But no, Patrick actually isn't annoying in this episode like he usually is. I find a lot of modern Patrick jokes just so cliched and just so pointless. And that's just another one of me rolling my eyes oh, the writers tried, but they just couldn't quite get it. You see, original Patrick was unpredictable and funny. Now, he went through a big plot hole in the mid-series, and they're trying sort of to get him back, but Patrick is still a big jerk in some episodes. But you can definitely see that they are trying, and they actually tried quite well in this episode, because it's actually kind of funny, and Patrick isn't annoying in this episode like he usually is. And it's kind of cool seeing characters like Bubble Bass and Patrick working together. That's just a combo you would have never expected to see, but here it is. When I hear good episodes from Season 12, I don't hear much because everyone's just why talk about Season 12? You have the chocolate episode from Season 3, the camping episode. I don't care about those overrated ones. Let's talk about these ones, please. Sorry, I got way off topic there. Anywho, Swamp Mates is definitely a good Season 12 episode. It's not quite my favorite, but it's definitely one that it's so underrated, and it's just such a good one. Not much else I really have to say, so let's move on to number 7, which is Band in Bikini Bottom. So far, we got an episode from a season, like Season 1, 7, 12, and now 5. Oh boy, Season 5, the season that really started going downhill. And you could clearly see it in a lot of these episodes in Season 5. But, like I said, there's a few that were pretty good. And Band in Bikini Bottom, in my opinion, is actually quite funny. I know, it's an episode not liked by many, but, and I can see why, but in my opinion, it just doesn't bother me, and it's just a really funny episode. So the episode starts with SpongeBob singing the I Love Krabby Patties song, and you know what, it's quite a catchy, funny song that SpongeBob just randomly comes up with. Oh, well, yeah. It is definitely not the best SpongeBob song ever. I don't find it bad. If anything, I think it's better than the striped sweater from Season 3, and that's saying a lot since Season 3 is what is known as the best SpongeBob season, while Season 5 is one of the worst ones. But the striped sweater just had such a weird song, and it was just so overrated. This one, it's just it goes with the flow, and it's catchy, and I actually don't mind it. Yes, need I remind you, Season 5 is my third least favorite season. I don't like Season 5 that much. One thing I do like with these mid-SpongeBobs, though, is the music. There's actually a decent amount of them in a lot of these episodes, and they're actually pretty good. And never talked about, for some reason. Anywho, I'm getting way off topic here. So, a lady comes into the Krusty Krab who has never tried a Krabby Patty before. She bans Krabby Patties, so they start working in SpongeBob's house, which is kind of funny to see. However, that lady returns and bans Krabby Patties. Again. And I think she's about to send them to jail too, but then one accidentally slips into her mouth, and now she loves Krabby Patties. You're probably like, why even bother trying to make a bad episode sound good? This is just like just one bite from season 3, but way worse. And I mean, yeah, it did rip off of another episode that I will admit is better. But at least to rip off of a, good episode, rather than something like Pressure or Dumped, or of course, Gary Takes a Bath. Plus, I like all the new characters that they introduced in this episode, too. The lady and all of her sisters are really interesting, plus the policeman that's her husband is just interesting, too. It's just such a funny, goofy episode. And I like how she sings the Krabby Patty song at the end with SpongeBob, too. You see, this is just a nice, short, simple Season 5 episode that actually works, in my opinion. Yes, there's definitely better choices. Yes, this episode does have filler in it, but it doesn't bother me like some of the other ones do. Like, I think there are way worse episodes in Season 5, like To Love a Patty, or Good Ol' What's-His-Name, or, of course, Waiting. Like, those are actual bad episodes of Season 5, in my opinion. This one is just so good. Well, so good for Season 5, at least. It's a good Season 5 episode. It's not my favorite, but it's a good one. Anywho, let's move on to number 6, which is Atlantis Square Pantis. Yeah, if Band of Bikini Bottom ain't gonna get me dislikes, this episode definitely will. Okay, hear me out. I know this episode is among some of the worst SpongeBob episodes, of all time. And it's among one of the worst, SpongeBob Season 5 episodes too, and one of the worst specials of all time. But honestly, what is the hate for this episode for? Besides the fact that it's in Season 5 and that it does get a little filler at sometimes, I just don't understand the hate for this episode. Like, the extreme hate. Like, the extreme hate you would see some in, like, Yours, Mine, and Mine, or Choir Boys. Yeah, those episodes are terrible. So am I expecting a Patrick being super stupid or Squidward getting tortured in this episode? Not really. Okay, am I expecting super lazy writing and so much filler? Not really that either. I mean, yeah, it's from Season 5, you are going to get a few little parts of that, but honestly, this episode ain't bad. Honestly, it's kind of good in my opinion. I know, I'm going to get a lot of dislikes from that. Now, yes, hear me out. It is not the best episode from Season 5, and it's definitely not the best special of all time either. But the worst special of all time, or one of the worst? I don't think so. Honestly, I look at this episode like if the main SpongeBob crew went to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, because that's kind of what it is, and I mean, it kind of shows that too. Plus, the songs aren't really that bad either. I think the worst one is probably Squidward's song, just because it's boring and slow, but like, all the others are fast-paced, interesting, and I like all the designs that they come up with too. Like for the Mr. Krabs and Squidward segments, and you gotta love the infinite, I wish you could just step through the painting, and then he just throws Squidward in. Heck, even like Willy Wonka, as the tour goes on, you get less and less people. Like Mr. Krabs stays in the money room, Sandy stays in the scientist room, and Squidward stays in the painting room, and of course that leaves SpongeBob and Patrick in the bubble room. Heck, there's even 5 people, like, why is this so similar? And while, yeah, the beginning is a little odd because it is kind of off from the rest of the episode, I mean, I still find it a very good special. I mean, okay, it ain't the best thing ever, but the worst? Absolutely not. Also, you gotta love how Plankton's there, too, just doing a bunch of silly things. I don't know, I just really don't understand the hate for this episode. I'm not gonna lie, I would take this any day over almost, like, half the episodes from Season 3. Yes, you heard me correctly. I would take what many people say one of the worst SpongeBob episodes is over a lot of the overrated crap we get in Season 3. Yes, that is how willing I am to, like, give this episode a chance and be like, this episode honestly ain't all that bad. I feel like this was just a case that it was put in a bad season, and a lot of people didn't really like it from the get-go. The special, the main good one from Season 5 is Pest of the West, which, agreed, I think it's a good episode. I think even better than this one, but Man, I do not understand the hate for this episode. Which, of course, everyone can have their own opinions. I completely am aware of that. But, in my opinion, I find this episode actually pretty darn good. Especially when compared to other episodes like SpongeBob You're Fired, or like Party Pooper Pants, or there's definitely others I can find too. So yeah, Atlantis Square Pantis. I definitely don't hate it. And I actually would say I actually like it. With that, let's move on to number 5, which is Truth or Square. I know. I'm getting prepared for all the dislikes to flood in because not only Atlantis Square Pantis, one of the worst SpongeBob episodes of all time, but also Truth and Square, another one of the worst episodes of all time. Except the only difference is that it's in the infinite, say it with me, Season 6. Which has episodes like Choir Boys in it. Yeah. But let's see why this episode is hated. So this episode is the 10th SpongeBob anniversary episode, and it does a good job showing that it's a 10th anniversary episode. We get to see SpongeBob and Squidward decorate the Krusty Krab, mostly SpongeBob, of course. However, they end up going into a freezer, and the freezer door ends up trapping them. Oh yeah, and Patrick is there too. So they end up climbing up in the vents to try to make their way back to, the restaurant, whatever you want to call it. Also, like Atlantis Square Pantis, Plankton is there too to just be, Plankton. And all the meantime, when they're crawling through all these vents, we get to see a bunch of flashbacks through, not really like from older episodes, but from, I don't know what the word is. It's almost kind of like the Krusty Krab training video 2.0, where they show a bunch of things like, when SpongeBob got his first patty, and the first time that he worked at the Krusty Krab, plus the old commercial. It's just a bunch of cool things. And like Atlantis Square Pantis, they do a good job with a bunch of the visuals too, making it look different and unique and, good. Instead of the usual one filler scene that we would usually get, especially from this season, now we get, a bunch of different things, and it works. Plus, you gotta love the Mr. Krabs, Squidward, Patrick, and SpongeBob adventure episodes. It's just such a fun time. Meanwhile, the guests outside the Krusty Krab are getting more and more impatient as they have to wait longer and longer. And eventually, by the time SpongeBob, Patrick, Squidward, and Mr. Krabs get out of the vents, they're all gone and just given up. So, SpongeBob sings, instead of it's "Oh Christmas Tree," it's "Oh Krusty Krab," which is kind of funny. Which that gets everyone back to the Krusty Krab to celebrate the 10th anniversary. Boy, oh boy, this episode must be bad if it's hated by so many people. And, honestly, I don't understand the hate for this episode. Does Squidward get tortured in this episode? No, not really. Sure, it's from Season 6, you might expect a few moments, but no, nothing compared to, like, Choir Boys or Cephalopod Lodge. Is Patrick a big jerk in this episode? No, he's not a big jerk in this episode either. Is there so much filler that it's just, like, pointless to watch this episode? No, there ain't much filler in this episode at all. Is it a terribly written 10th anniversary episode? To many people, yeah, it is. But in my opinion, it's a pretty decent episode. Especially when coming from, the worst SpongeBob season of all time, Season 6. Like, really? This episode is hated because of what? I take this episode any day over, like, most of the other episodes from Season 6, like Choir Boys, Cephalopod Lodge, Boating Buddies. Those episodes are way worse than this one. I think the problem is that it gets hyped up to be a really good thing, and then once it's shown, it ain't as good as what everyone thought it was. Which, that's understandable, but come on, this episode is over 10 years old now. Like, just accept that it's a decent Season 6 episode. Ha, just kidding. Everyone can have their own opinions. But, it's kind of hard to see where the hate comes from in this episode. Might have a few filler moments in here, but that's just mainly because Patchy comes in and just ruins the whole thing. If you don't like the Patchy scenes, just skip them like what I do. Like, it's pretty easy to do that. if you take out the patchy scenes, this episode is, even better yet. And yes, I know, you all are probably like, stop talking about the good things about Truth or Square. Talk about the bad things. I did. The patchy scenes. There you go. And yeah, it is a little bit square for being a 10th anniversary, especially compared to the SpongeBob's Big Birthday Blowout that we got in Season 12. Now that special, was even better than Truth and Square. But unlike Truth or Square, it was an actually liked episode. Sure, it wasn't overrated or anything, or over-talked about, but it was good, and people agree it was miles better than the 10th anniversary's Truth or Square, which, I agree, SpongeBob's Big Birthday Blowout is better than Truth or Square, but Truth or Square ain't bad either. This special was just placed in, the wrong season. Season 6, which hosted a bunch of terrible episodes. But, come on. A bad Season 6 episode? This special ain't that bad, honestly. I enjoy watching it. Like I said, though, everyone has their own opinions, and everyone's just kind of stuck to this is a weak Season 6 episode, which, that's fine. I just completely disagree, though. I find it a really good Season 6 episode. Alright, I better stop talking about this episode. In my opinion, it's good. Now let's move on to number 4, which is Gary in Love. Yep, I know. We're back to Season 7. Oh boy, oh goody. What do we have this time? An actually decent Gary episode for once is what we have. So Gary's watching TV and he ends up loving the lovey type of TV shows. So SpongeBob takes him to the park where he meets a snail that he really likes. However, the big bad snail comes and says, "No, the snail is mine." So the next morning, Gary sneaks out to try to find this female snail that he really likes. And then we see SpongeBob trying to find Gary to get him back from what he thinks is this giant monster thingy. Which is honestly super funny, and I'm glad they took the more comedic route rather than the emotional route like they did for Have You Seen the Snail? So Gary finds the female snail that he really likes, and, the episode just goes from there. SpongeBob eventually finds Gary, and then the female snail that Gary liked goes with another male snail. So the bully snail that was also trying to get Gary, now him and Gary are best friends. We've seen crap like grooming Gary and Gary takes a bath. I was not expecting good Gary episodes to exist after Have You Seen the Snail, but no, Gary in Love is actually a good Gary episode. Especially since it's coming from Season 7. No, this episode is actually really good. And it's basically, it kind of has the story of Have You Seen the Snail? Because Gary runs off, and SpongeBob tries to find him. Except that's not what the full episode is focused on. It's also kind of like Snail Race from Season 3, where Gary falls in love with a snail. And heck, I'd even say Gary in Love is better than that episode from Season 3. I know, it's an episode from Season 3. It's supposed to be good if it's not Party Pooper Pants. Well, sorry, I think Gary in Love is a lot better than whatever that one is, Snail Race. Well, I haven't really heard any complaints about this episode. Obviously, it's not overrated or anything either. It's really underrated, honestly, not gonna lie. And especially since it's coming from my absolute least favorite SpongeBob character, Gary. So I'm glad we at least got a, good episode, where Gary was actually, acting like an actual pet instead of, smarter than SpongeBob in some cases. So this is easily one of the better Season 7 episodes. In fact, it might be one of the best Season 7 episodes. And while the best episode is mainly Enchanted Tiki Dreams, that's what everyone usually agrees on, which I agree. That one's definitely a good episode too, but some of these other ones, no one really ever talks about. Well, yeah, a good Gary episode coming from a bad season. Now let's move on to number 3, which is Love That Squid. Speaking of good episodes from Season 7, wow, we have another love episode back-to-back. After getting a whole bunch of crap like Good Neighbors, Cephalopod Lodge, Boating Buddies, Professor Squidward, Choir Boys, I wasn't expecting Squidward episodes being good much anymore, especially one coming from Season 7, in my opinion, the second worst SpongeBob episode season. But no, they actually ended up making a rather good Season 7 episode that really reminds me of Krusty Love back from Season 2. While yes, Krusty Love is still definitely better, this episode is a good episode too, and especially a good one from the second worst season. So, Squidward finds a female squid who he falls in love with, and of course he gets choked up and doesn't really know how to talk to this girl because, of course, he's nervous. And what's actually kind of cool is that SpongeBob, of all people, end up going to, help Squidward out, which is really nice to him. Really nice to see, especially when SpongeBob is the usual annoying neighbor. So SpongeBob is actually, going to help Squidward out. Wow. So, of course, Squidward gets to go on his date with, I forget what her name is. We'll just call her the female Squidward. So SpongeBob teaches Squidward how to go out on a date, since Squidward hasn't done it in a long time, which is really funny to see and hear, and also rather mean. Anyway, so SpongeBob takes Squidward up to the top of his pineapple to eat plastic food that Patrick bakes. Not bakes, but makes. It's just such a hilarious mess, and I love it already. Well, like I said, it ain't as good as Krusty Love, but at least they tried in this one. Eventually, Squidward does get annoyed at SpongeBob and yells at him, with female Squidward watching. But female Squidward doesn't mind, and they end up going on their date after all. The episode really does feel like Krusty Love, too. It starts off at the Krusty Krab, and then it ends up at someone else's house. And then, eventually, someone gets mad at someone, and it just... I don't know, but this episode is just such a good one. It easily could have been in a season 1, 2, or 3, or even like a modern season, and I wouldn't have even blinked an eye. Heck, I'd take this episode over like half the stuff we got in season 3, or even stuff like Squid on Strike. Now that is a bad Squidward episode. But man, Squidward actually not getting tortured in a season 7 episode, even when he's with SpongeBob? When does that ever happen? Even nowadays, Squidward still gets tortured when he's with SpongeBob. Not all the time, but there's definitely times. But love that Squid shows that they can do good SpongeBob episodes. Even if this is like deep down in the mid-series of SpongeBob, it's still a good episode. Now let's move on to number 2, which is SpongeBob's Last Stand. Yet again, we've reached another special that is just hated by many. The bad SpongeBob special from Season 5 is Atlantis. It's from Season 6, it's Truth or Square. And Season 7, it seems to be SpongeBob's Last Stand for some reason. Yet again, I just don't agree. I find this episode so funny. And while yes, it is definitely full of filler, it doesn't bother me at all. The Jellyfishing song is kind of interesting, and I love the Give Jellyfish Fields a Chance song too. Literally, they should have changed it to Give Mid-Season SpongeBob Songs a Chance, because that would have been much more appropriate. The story's pretty simple, though. Plankton builds a highway over the Krusty Krab to the Chum Bucket. Everyone is all for the highway until the jellyfish have nowhere to go, and then they bother the people, then the people want to destroy the highway. It's kind of a goofy story, not gonna lie, and it's kind of funny seeing just a giant highway over the Krusty Krab of all things. And Squidward and SpongeBob yet again work together a bit. And you gotta love the last little bit where all of SpongeBob's friends get to help out getting rid of this highway thingy. Well, maybe not all of them, but a decent amount of them. Well, yes, it is a simple story, but it's a good one. Especially coming from, Season 7. I know, I've been adding too many Season 7 episodes, but I mean, Season 7 is full of bad episodes, but SpongeBob's Last Stand being a bad one, compare that to Yours, Mine, and Mine and One Course Meal, and then you'll see what the bad episode is. Yet again, I feel like it's just hated because it feels like filler, it's in Season 7, and it's just a simple story. Which, that's understandable, definitely. But in my opinion, that doesn't bother me. I actually find it a really good, Season 7 episode. One that I can actually enjoy and like. Miles better than the true bad ones like One Course Meal and Yours, Mine, and Mine. But like I said, everyone has their own opinion. I just get, ugh. We should move on, though, because we already are at 34 minutes. Before we get to number one, I have a bit of honorable mentions. I'll talk through them fast, though, so let's start. Pickles. This, in my opinion, is a classic SpongeBob episode. It first gets us introduced to Bubble Bass, the very picky eater. He hides the pickles under his tongue when SpongeBob cooks him a patty, and now SpongeBob's all freaked out and he can't cook anything. So then, surprisingly, Mr. Krabs actually goes and tries to help SpongeBob out, and it ends up working out at the end with SpongeBob finding out that, Bubble Bass hid the pickles under his tongue. I think this episode is a pretty good, underrated Season 1 episode. Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 2. Yeah, we actually got 2 of them in Season 1. And while the introduction to them was kind of boring, I definitely like this second episode better. It's kind of funny seeing SpongeBob, Barnacle Boy, and Mermaid Man just drive around town just hanging out. It's just so funny. And I love the Jingle Bells song that they end up singing too. And I would agree, I would say Barnacle Boy is a little annoying in this episode, but it's still definitely better than, like, the Gary annoyance. Ugh. He just kind of gets a little grumpy like Squidward does. Well, yeah, I think it's yet again another pretty good Season 1 episode that I find extremely underrated. That Snow Lady. So I've already talked about this episode when I talked about the best Seasons 4, 5, and 6 episodes. And my opinions still remain exactly the same. I find it such an underrated Season 4 episode that even I forget it exists sometimes. And that's saying a lot, because this is one of my absolute favorite episodes from that season. It's just such a funny, goofy episode with Patrick dressing up as a girl and then Mr. Krabs and Squidward just falling in love with him. And yeah, the good episodes from Season 4 I can definitely agree with, but That Snow Lady is never really up there on the good list. It's just kind of one of those forgettable ones, kind of like Naughty Nautical Neighbors. But yeah, That Snow Lady, definitely a not bad episode. A good episode. Nightlight. Man, what a good Season 5 episode of all things. SpongeBob's afraid of the dark, so he gets a bunch of nightlights. It's just so funny, and it almost kind of reminds me of the Crabborg from Season 3, except instead of SpongeBob being scared of robots, he's being scared of the dark now. Yes, this episode gets very random, especially when Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy randomly come into place, but I like this type of randomness, at least in this type of episode. It makes it funny and interesting what is from a pretty bad season with a lot of filler in it. And it's just funny how he puts the nightlights all over the house then, just so he has no inch of darkness whatsoever. In my opinion, it's a good Season 5 episode. Goofy, and it's never really talked about too much. Bucket, Sweet Bucket. Man, I always forget about this episode when I come to look at the best Season 5 episodes. But man, this is a really good one. It's basically just Patrick, SpongeBob, and Squidward redecorating the Chum Bucket. And you gotta love how towards the end, the Chum Bucket is literally just the Krusty Krab. And then Mr. Krabs comes back just to push the Krusty Krab back to its normal spot. It's, yet again, just such a random, funny episode from Season 5 that ain't talked about much. But I mean, let's be real, not a lot of episodes from Season 5 are talked about a lot. At least the good ones. The Battle of Bikini Bottom. No, not the video game, the very underrated episode from Season 5. This episode is basically like Sandcastles in the Sand, but Patrick ain't as annoying in it. And I like it way better than that one, by the way. Especially all the funny, clean, dirty things that SpongeBob and Patrick end up doing. It's just so funny. In Sandcastles in the Sand, I feel like Patrick always had the upper hand of doing stuff. But this episode, it feels like SpongeBob and Patrick get an equal fair amount of, like, I don't know what the word is. Like, not punishments, but like, pranks, if you know what I mean. It's just an overall goofy Season 5 episode, and yeah, Patrick is still annoying in this episode, but I found him way worse in Sandcastles in the Sand. Patty Caper. Wow, we actually got a good SpongeBob Patrick episode here, where they're basically just following Plankton around. And it's just really funny seeing all the stuff they do, and I love the ending too, with Plankton and Mr. Krabs switching lives. It's just such a random, yet funny episode from Season 5. The Krabby Chronicle. Man, even this title screen is very interesting. Basically, SpongeBob makes up a bunch of lies about the Bikini Bottom pedestrians. Definitely with the help of Mr. Krabs, though, because SpongeBob, as you know, doesn't lie much. Honestly, and the stories that they come up with, that SpongeBob comes up with, are pretty funny, like Patrick marrying a pole, which gives Patrick a taste of his own medicine after being a jerk. And some of the other ones are funny too, like the Chum Bucket and the Larry and Mrs. Puff. Some of them are pretty funny too. And yes, the greedy cheapskate gets a taste of his own medicine at the end too. It's just such a well thought, good season 6 episode. I know, good season 6 episode. That's hard to believe. Ditchin'. It's simple. SpongeBob ditches boating school to go see Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, and he tries to get back. It's simple, but they do a really good job with it. And yes, you might think, why am I rushing through all these? We're at 40 minutes already. I need to rush through these. But yeah, basically a good Season 6 episode. Chum Caverns. Wow, what a really unique restaurant location. And it's just, I don't know, I just really love, like, the scenery of this episode. Like, it almost makes me want to have some chum. They make it look so delicious. Okay, no, that's saying a lot. But you get what I mean. It's just such a good episode, and a very good one, especially when coming from Season 6. The Other Patty. Basically, it's another one of those fun Mr. Krabs and Plankton working together episodes. When they find another restaurant that is kind of stealing both of their business, mainly the Krusty Krabs, they both work together to try to figure out what the formula is. And it's really funny seeing both of them work together, and I think it's even better than ones like Best Frenemies from Season 4. So yeah, it's a very good episode. Sweet and Sour Squid. I've already talked about this in the best Season 7, 8, and 9 episodes, but man, this episode is just not loved enough. It's cool seeing Plankton and Squidward working together, and it actually works out pretty well. It's a really funny episode, and Plankton goes to jail for once instead of, Squidward. And you gotta love the song that's midway through this episode, too. Yet again, just another one of those underrated mid-season songs, and another underrated mid-season episode. Eagan Urchin. This episode is a really funny Season 9 episode where there's an urchin and everyone is afraid of it. So they all try to kill it, and even at the point where Plankton comes and tries to kill it too, which is just so funny to see. There's a lot of funny things in this episode, like Plankton dressing up as a female urchin to get all the other urchins away, and then when SpongeBob releases the urchins back into the Krusty Krab, it's just a great Season 9 episode. Tartar Sauce. Yeah, the boating episodes get a little boring in my opinion. It's just the same simple SpongeBob failing his driver's license, and then we get Mrs. Puff torture parts of it too. But no, this episode was actually quite funny. Mr. Krabs is actually the one teaching SpongeBob this time around, which is actually really surprising for him to see because he's usually, not that type of person. But okay, I'm glad we got it. And you gotta love the random times that he just, not the random times, but like every time he destroys the Krusty Krab. It's just such a funny episode. Sold. Basically a dumb SpongeBob Patrick episode where they think that their houses have gotten sold, and Squidward convinces him that that's what actually happened. Well, at least that there's new people living in their house, like some sort of German family and then a rock band. It's just such a goofy Season 9 episode. I always forget about this one, but it is so funny, and I love just, I don't know. This episode is so good, yet so underrated. The Checkup. Honestly, I could probably put about half the Season 11 episodes in the underrated in this list, just because of how underrated modern SpongeBob is. Season 10, 11, and 12 are extremely underrated and unappreciated. But man, this is a good episode. I love seeing Squidward and SpongeBob working together to try to give Mr. Krabs his checkup. And it's really funny seeing that Mr. Krabs is the one who's afraid, instead of like the normal SpongeBob or Squidward. It's just so funny to see that he's the one afraid of the checkups, and that Squidward and SpongeBob are actually, working together. And you gotta love the random thing at the end where Larry pretends to be Mr. Krabs. It's just such a goofy, funny Season 11 episode. Like I said, I could add like half the episodes from Season 11. Gary and Spot. Basically one of my least favorite characters working with one of my favorite characters. But they made it work, because apparently it's on the good list, right? And it is. Gary and Spot keep running away from a animal catcher, or whatever you want to call it, animal control. However, the animal control dude is just lonely and wants a girlfriend. So Gary makes a girlfriend out of slime for him. Okay. They end up getting married, and the episode just kind of ends. I don't know. It's a very good Season 12 episode, and yet again, extremely underrated. You also gotta love how Patrick's just randomly there too, because why the heck not? And it isn't in an annoying way like some of the modern season Patrick episodes are. Nah, he's just there, and I like what they did with him. Honestly, I can go on forever about underrated SpongeBob episodes, especially from these modern seasons. But I think we're done here. So now let's quickly go on to number 1, which is Dream Hoppers. Yep, we're ending on a Season 12 episode. And I mean, why the heck not? Dream Hoppers takes an idea from the very first season and just kind of does the same thing, but at the same time does a arguably better job at it. So SpongeBob's dreaming that he is cooking a bunch of Krabby Patties. One of them gets loose and goes into Patrick's dream. So then we get to see a funny scene with Patrick just being Patrick, I guess. Gotta love when they're randomly just falling down Patrick, and then everything that Patrick has eaten just starts throwing a party. And then there's other scenes like the ice cream scene where they're trying to find the Krabby Patty. Oh, and of course the Squidward scene. Are you tired of the Squidward torture and stuff? Well, Squidward finally gets to give them a taste of their own medicine. He uses SpongeBob and Patrick as paint utensils and, like I said, gives them a taste of their own medicine. It's such a good feeling to see after crap that we've gotten like Club SpongeBob and so on. Then the episode just kind of ends, but I mean, man, it's just such a clever episode. Also the fact that there's not really any dialogue in this episode either. So it's kind of